Your most recent.
Yes, Fred.
He does, and he pays attention to details, but he's not. Very efficient.
Well, I hope.
Yeah. He'll show up and.
Yeah, he might.
He may not. No, well, I don't know that. I told him that he has to email back and forth. I suggested he go first because he has the most professional and then I just build
Far away. Nothing wrong with moving. I think and no, exactly. You know, another great thing. Is Glenn Lindsay. I'm trying to remember who might have been on. Or you know what might have been holy memory. Yeah, sure. He lived in Camillus for a long time. Yeah. So that might have been really good. Yeah, it could. So while we're getting ready, I'm gonna invite all of you to come up and stand in front of, behind the microphone. Because the camera doesn't stand, so I want them to kind of see your face. So just come on up, because otherwise they don't see us here.
With no visa
I'm gonna invite our folks that are here at the center to come into the screen so you could see these wonderful folks, about 26 or 7 of them. So look toward the camera over there and let's wave. So come on in, get bunched up here. Yeah, so the camera's over in the far.
Yeah, you're cut off at Greg Garrett. LA.
Hi, Rom.
So look in that direction. Turn around this way.
Hi, Rom.
Hi, Rom. All your children are here, Rom.
Hello, wow, good to see you all.
Hi, Glory.
Amazing. Amazing, good to see you. That's beautiful. Amazing.
I know he's zooming in. And we have Glory and the group from Orange County. We have
Yes.
Telesco and his group from San Pedro. We have
That's
some
amazing.
individuals coming in and Rambaru from Australia. So we're
I get the prize.
just waiting another couple moments. Fred, our other speakers, zooming in also. So we're just take another moment or two.
I don't know, yeah, we can, oh, no, you can go. Are you saying? Oh.
So we want to thank you for your patience as we gather ourselves together. My name is Father Chris Panett. I'm pastor at St. Camillus Center, and I'm the administrator of our Urban Interfaith Center. And Ron Brewer-Brinken on our screen is our director and our educator. And we want to welcome you to this annual gathering that we have tried to pull together before, during COVID, and now in this period of time. So we want to thank those who are here at the California Endowment Center. If you've never been to the Endowment Center, it's an amazing nonprofit resource. If you're in LA, you can get these rooms, smaller rooms and large rooms, for free. If you're a nonprofit or you're a church body, you just sign up, and it's an amazing place. We hope during the breaks you'll make your way out to the little garden area and just see the beautiful places around. For those who are in the room, if you have not found, if you go out the back door and to your left, the restrooms are there for you. We invite you to turn your pagers and cell phones off unless you are the emergency pager person. And I'm assuming all of you around Southern California, you're probably having to deal with that too. Someone leaving the room because of a pager, and we understand that. In our Christian Catholic tradition, today is the feast of St. Camillus. The day wasn't chose for that, but it happened to be a Tuesday in July that we've been doing this for years. Camillus was one of those people in the 1500s that did not have a clear sense of who he was. He was definitely being pulled into addiction, both with gambling and drinking. He wanted to serve in the military, but he could not do it because of a wound. And so what he did is what we do. We as chaplain people, he started going out and saying, "Hello, how can I help you?" And he started dragging wounded people to clinics. And out of that, a community called the Camillan Fathers and Sisters was created. And so part of today is about the topic, self-forgiveness, but part of it is, like any CPE gathering, self-reflection. Where am I in this? Where am I being pulled in this? What's my experience? And how does that help me and assist me when I'm visiting an inmate, a patient, or just one of my colleagues? So we hope that at the end of the day, what is shared here and what is shared at your table and in small groups at home can add to that experience of being chaplain, being a CPE student, or in that whatever ministry you might be a part of. So welcome. And we are blessed to be in partnership with the Association of Clinical Pastoral Educators, as well as St. Camillus Center. As we gather in this sacred space, we acknowledge that the land on which we gather was, for many generations, stewarded by the Tongva, Kiev, and Chumash people. We recognize that the enduring presence of the indigenous peoples connected to and on this land. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather on this territory and to work in this community, and we commit ourselves to the work of justice and reconciliation with all indigenous people. So at this time, I welcome you, and I invite Ram, our director and educator, to welcome us. She is in Australia.
Yes, it's so wonderful to be here. It's 2 a.m. in the morning, and I'm fresh and alive and awake, and I'm very grateful for that. Yes, so welcome to all of you. It's so nice to see some of you that I know on Zoom, and looking forward to a very inspiring day today.
Thank you, Ram. So I'd invite our students from the Camillus unit to come forward who are going to guide us in a moment of reflection. So Ram, if you could begin, and
Yes.
then we'll just go straight to the line with you, okay?
Okay. O all attractive one, O source of all life and love, light up our hearts so that we may hear the message of a world in which the wrongs of the past are recognized, a world in which a reconciled people walk and talk together, sharing stories, a world in which all burn with the desire to have peace and justice reign. Amen.
Good morning. My name is Paul Maxey, and I'm coming from the Catholic religious tradition. And it was 2 years ago that I stumbled across Fred Luskin's book, Forgive for Good. And I'm very excited today because it's one of my favorite books that I've read. In the Catholic tradition and in Christianity, forgiveness is a really big theme. We can turn to the Our Father to see that. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who trespass against us. And so what I see in that is this promise that if we forgive those who have hurt us, that we will be forgiven for the things that we've done to hurt others. But here's a scripture that I wanted to share because we have the literal sense of scripture and then we have the spiritual sense. And I want to focus on this, on the spiritual sense. And this is what it says. Then Jesus said to the host who invited him to his party, when you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you. And I see in these words a parallel to forgiveness. When someone doesn't know how to treat us right, or maybe they're incapable of treating us right, when we forgive them and we treat them with love, we are promised a great reward in heaven.
Well, I stood where I stood because I thought I would be the last person. Being in CPE has helped me to try to put in practice what has been in my head for a while. And part of the gift I'm getting from just sitting and learning is self-reflection. And part of self-reflection for me is leading me to a lot of questioning, curiosity rather than judgment. So I've been focusing on my own thoughts, my own actions, my own words toward others. And I'm going to read a prayer from somebody who influenced C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was an Anglican lay person who wrote a lot. And C.S. Lewis said everything he ever wrote was influenced by George MacDonald. And I tried to research on George MacDonald, and there's a short prayer he prayed on self-reflection and repentance. which I have made mine. O Lord, I have been talking to the people. Thought's wheels have round me whirled a fairy song, and the recoil of my own words airy ripple. My heart unheedful has puffed up and blown. Therefore, I cast myself before thee prone. Lay cool hands on my burning brain, I press. From my heart, the swelling emptiness. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Garen Hamamcan, and I come from the Armenian Orthodox tradition. So I have a prayer here by a saint of the Armenian Church named Saint Gregory of Narek. Saint Gregory of Narek is known as a theologian, saint, a writer, a poet, and his writings and his prayers were so influential that he was actually accepted into the Catholic Church as a doctor of the church. Now, Saint Gregory had a very interesting philosophy. He viewed himself as the most flawed man on the planet, a view that he shared with Saint Paul. And in doing this, Saint Gregory said that if he views himself as a man flawed beyond measure, then it's much easier to forgive others their fault. When you view the entire world as a human being that makes mistakes, it's much easier to forgive others their faults. So this prayer, I mean, I don't have a translation. It is in Armenian, and I'm going to attempt to sing it for you guys. But the theme is that love, mercy, and forgiveness brings peace on the world. Իխորոտ սրդի խոսքն տաստուձո ընգա քաղցրությամբ դեր աստված հզոր ստարնացողի ժաղաճանց մադիր կտությամբ արբատ կարյալս թիմոք պարադյա համենաբարկև զամոտագան դխրությունց դուրանգիս պերգրուհության Մահանքույնս նիրման իխորության քիշերիս արեխոսությամբ հայցվադոտ սրպովո աստվածահատնիտ և ամենայն ընրելոտ ամպոպյա բարուրյա ըզբադու հանդեսությանց սկայարանատս իմաստից անզարուրելի զեդեմամբ իձը պագան խրովությանց գենցաղագանս պամանց Անրճագան երազոց, խոլագանած նորից, իշադագավ քո հուսույթ, անվնասելի բաշպանյալ, Եվս տապյալ վերստին, իննչման է ձանրության, ամեն ասկաս տարտնության, հոգենորոք զվարդության պիքեզ արցանացյալ, Զայսայն մախտանած, ուրման պավադոց կեզ ամեն օրտնյալ, թակավոր պարած անջարից, պարապանողած երգնակում մարխմպից երկակցյալ, երգնից արակել, զիթու պարավորյալ ես, ամենայն արարածոտ, ավիդյանց, ավիդենից, ամեն.
Good morning. My name is Jessica. 6 years ago, I gave up everything in China to come here to learn chaplaincy because there is no chaplaincy training. And even today, there's no appropriate translation of chaplaincy in Chinese. So it always reminds me it's so important to learn the skill and bring the gift to people who have no assessment for spiritual care. And today I'm going to share a sutra from Buddhist tradition. Well, no, there are so many traditions in Buddhism, and all of them share the same practice, which called goodwill. In Pali word is metta. You have the English version on your table. I'm going to chat part of them in Mandarin. 此经 如此思维，愿一切众生住于快乐平安中，心内得安适。愿所有一切众生无有例外，强壮、孱弱的，大中小体型的，微妙、卑劣形色的，可关键、不可关键的，远在天边、近在眼前的，已出生、将投生的，愿一切众生内心得安适，愿人们不欺骗、谋害彼此，无论何处，不鄙视轻侮任何人，不因怒意、怨憎而希冀他人受苦，如同慈母以生命照护独子，同样的，应如是善护对所有众生的无量之心。Miss Meta, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim, and I'm a Zen Buddhist priest. We don't really have much of a concept of forgiveness in Buddhism. It's just not that much of a theme. But we do have this ceremony of atonement that we do traditionally once a month in the Zen tradition. And it's a time to renew our vows. And I'm going to share with you a short piece. It's called the Gatha of Atonement. And every time someone in the Zen tradition takes vows or renews their vows, we use this Gatha to precede it as a way of letting go, of purifying, of being ready to receive and renew the vows that we take on and try and live and embody to the best of our ability. And in the Buddhist tradition, we refer to these ethical guidelines as training precepts. So this idea of training, of practice, of doing our best and knowing that we'll make mistakes, but we're able to learn from these mistakes, to let go, and to come back with renewed intention and a motivation to live as best we can. So this Gatha that I'm going to share, we recite this as part of that process of letting go and renewing. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, speech, and thought, now I atone for it all. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rabbi Jade Carter, and similarly to what Jim said, our tradition focuses more on atonement rather than forgiveness. However, Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, otherwise known as the Rambam, the great medieval commentator, wrote, "The sages made clear when interpreting the verse of Leviticus 19:2, 'You shall be holy.' They said, 'God is gracious, so be you also gracious. God is merciful, so be you also merciful.' As we sing in each high holiday services at the beginning of the Jewish New Year. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Vechanun, Erech Alpaim, Rav Chesed Ve'emet, Noseh Chesed Ve'alafiv, Noseh Avon Va'fesha, Vechata V'nakeh." Our God, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in faithfulness, extending kindness to the thousandth generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin. May we all be holy as we emulate the divine together.
So I just invite us to take a moment and to hold these reflective prayer statements in our hearts, just to be aware of what resonates in our hearts and our spirits, in our breath. So I'm going to I want to thank our participants from our Urban Interfaith Center for leading us and invite you to join back on the tables. And Yesenia is helping us on our tech. So at this time, we're going to invite you to take a few minutes at your tables here, where you're at, and you will be scrambled into small groups of 3 or 4 people.
God, you are so handsome. Why are you so handsome? So you're Filipino.
Okay,
He
Fred,
looks
hello,
really
welcome.
Doesn't look Korean.
So I'm going to invite you all on the screens to mute yourself, but Yesenia is now going to scramble you into groups of 3 or 4 people. And I just invite us to take 5 or 6 minutes. Hopefully you've met each other. What does self-forgiveness speak to you this morning? What comes up from your own lived experience and your own spiritual tradition? And we'll call you back in about 7 minutes. What did you hear this morning? What speaks to you? What does self-forgiveness say to you? And we'll join back in the Lord. So for those of us in the room, we are only seeing people who have opened their line with a picture. So there's another dozen or so people that names are appearing on Zoom, but are not with us visibly. So we want to welcome all of you who are being visibly seen, and we want to celebrate that we're all together in this time to reflect on self-forgiveness in my own life and the life of the people that we serve. So often, the other night, I was called to a family. A person was had been in the hospital a few days, 93-year-old person. And as I walked in the room, the 10 doctors just stepped back and they didn't have anything else to do. They entrusted it to us, the spiritual care providers. And as I walked in the room, they said he was doing okay yesterday and he crashed overnight. We had an emergency surgery this morning and it didn't go well. And the family want full code. So of course they said, so you go take care of them in the family room. So I walked to the family room, about 20, 25 people. And in Spanish, we invited them to join around the bed of their father, their grandfather, their great-grandfather. And as they gathered together around that bed, as so many of us, if not all of us, have seen, there was this powerful moment of pain and love, of forgiveness and gratitude. And what we're about today is taking that we get to do at the bedsides and in our own circles and take some self-reflection on what that means to us. Several years ago, Fred Luskin and I were sitting at a death penalty focused board meeting. And in the midst of that meeting, it was clear that this person has deep insights about forgiveness, especially when it comes to the incarcerated. And we're grateful that Fred is coming in from up at the Stanford area this morning. He is the director of the Stanford University Forgiveness Project, a consultant at the University on Health Promotion, and a professor at the Institution of Transpersonal Psychology. He's written several books, including the book that we highlighted on our program, Forgive for Good. In the midst of that period of my journey, I came across this wonderful person, Herb. And Herb is a author of several books, a prolific speaker and guider of reflections, meditations based on the 12-step spirituality. He's a graduate in psychology and has 40 years in consulting in this area, certified spiritual director. And so we bring these two people on the journey to just help guide us and walk with us this morning. So I'm going to have Herb come up and put our context for the day, and then Fred will come to you, and we're gonna try to keep this first session, Fred, to about an hour. Then we're going to take a few minute break so people can stretch, get another bagel here or a cup of coffee at home, use the restroom, and then we'll come back for our second part. And then we will have the last half hour in small groups process also. So welcome Herb and welcome Fred.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Just a reminder for those of you at home, if you can mute your screens, it's great to see your faces, but if you could just mute, and then we'll have you open up your volume when we get to that part of the morning.
Thank you very much. My name is Herb, and I'm here to help. And I'm here with Fred. We've had some experience together co-facilitating. I'm going to just do a short introduction, then I'm going to turn it over to Fred. He and I have agreed to split the time. He gets the first hour, I get whatever is necessary to continue. And I just want to say that I came into a 12-step fellowship when I acknowledged that I was alcoholic in 1984. So I've been at it for a while. In the beginning, somebody said something about getting to know who you are. I really knew who I was, I thought, until I came into recovery and did some very heavy lifting spiritual work. And I saw that, in fact, I was completely delusional. I didn't know who I was not. I didn't know who I was. And part of the process of waking up was also the process of forgiveness, which I did some work that I'll talk about later on. And then I met Fred. We were asked to be on a panel, I think in 1990, actually, sometime after, just after he had published the book. I had not read the book until I was asked to be on the panel with him. Then I read the book and I saw its relevance to the spiritual journey and human development. At the end of the panel that day, I said to Fred, wow, the process of forgiveness in the scientific psychological arena is exactly the same as in the spiritual 12-step arena. The vocabulary is different. And he said, yes, yes, yes. He says, but, and in all humility, and you'll get that from Fred, he said, but you guys have, you spiritual people, you people in a 12-step program have a real X plus advantage. And I said, well, what's that? He said, you have God. He said, as a scientist, as a psychologist, I can't bring in that component. I think I'm actually recalling the story correctly, Fred, but you can correct it if not. My wife always said that she doesn't remember anything that happened that I always said did happen. And I just said, I've never let facts get in the way of a good story. So Fred refers to the work that I do as spiritual. He refers to the work that he does as secular, and he and I enjoy one another in terms of the complementary co-facilitating, attempting to make those paradoxes complementary. So now Fred is going to take it, and I'm sure you'll enjoy the ride.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fred Luskin. I'm a long-standing teacher at Stanford University. I know Chris because we're both on a nonprofit board together. I do remember the conversation with Herb. I do believe what I said then is true, that you do have an advantage if you have a belief and a foundation of a higher power. It turns out that the research is if you just say that you're something religious, it confers no advantage. So calling yourself Buddhist or Muslim or Christian or Jewish in and of itself is no indicator that you will be moral or anything salutary. They've even done studies on that. You know, they stick people in rooms who say that they're Christian, and then they drop a $20 bill, and when they walk out, and the Christians take the $20 bill as much as the heathens do. I spent a couple of years studying where does religion hit the road, the value of it, and it turns out that there are health benefits to people who have a real faith, that they recover more quickly from illness, their kids do end up less likely to be in drugs or on jail, but you have to actually work it. And, you know, they talk about extrinsic and intrinsic religiosity. So extrinsic is you go to church, you tell people you're this, you go to Bible study, those are great. Intrinsic is prayer and meditation, In order for it to have a really deep life impact, you kind of need some of both. That you need the intrinsic practice, the inner work, the prayer, the mantra, the meditation, the centering. And it turns out you need some social support along the way. You need some framework. When those are in place, when people are actually acting religious, they are more likely to forgive. And they're more likely to live moral lives, which took me a while to recognize. One time, and this is not meant to minimize any religious thing. I have had a 40 plus year meditation practice since college. And I mean, I know you're all in Los Angeles. My religious practice is Self-Realization Fellowship from the Lake Shrine in Los Angeles. I mean, I have my own thing. But there's something about forgiveness that is really hard. And if you don't have schema, a mental category that God wants you to do this and that it's important, the energetic of built-in mental strata of protection and revenge, which are built into the system, are the first line of defense. Forgiveness is also built into the system. We have encoding and mental apparatus and all sorts of things that make forgiveness a natural response, make revenge a natural response, make negative protection a natural response. That's one of the reasons why religious education can be so valuable. It reminds people, it puts into place categories, it provides social support for why you should do this stuff. But without some practice inside, doesn't happen that often. So one of the things that, again, we set up the Stanford Forgiveness Project decades ago to try to teach people, and I use the word secular. I mean, we have no denomination, and I've given talks at, law school. I mean, I've given keynote addresses for the American Bar Association. I've given talks for the American Medical Association, and I've given sermons at multiple churches. Because when I say secular, I mean, what are the key ingredients of forgiveness? And it is easier if you believe there's a higher power that wants you to do this and will help you on the way. It's easier. But it's not necessary. It's easier. One of the ways that we found to bypass that was we would talk about the health benefits of forgiveness. You have to have a hook. You have to have some reason that people want what you're selling. Unfortunately, and I told this to thousands of psychotherapists, if you don't practice yourself, don't bother telling other people to forgive. Like, don't waste their breath. Go home and be nasty to somebody, but don't tell anybody else to forgive if you're not at least working on it. Because you'll carry very little conviction. It's one of the problems with psychotherapists trying to teach forgiveness. Most of them don't believe in it. They believe in expressing your feelings and getting it out and articulating your grievance and explaining why mom treated you this way, so that's why you have to treat somebody else that way. Forgiveness cuts all that. I do believe in whatever my extraordinarily limited understanding of soul is, that forgiveness is a soul quality because it transcends a little bit the normal scared protective human's impulse to strike back. The biological imperative of protection and safety are very hard to overcome if you don't have a good reason. So I have been in places where karma is a damn good reason. You know, do you want to pay this forward and give yourself 37 more lifetimes where you have to deal with this crap? Go ahead. Physical health has been a wonderful reason for people. Wonderful reason. So let me just, I teach a lot through guided imagery and through meditation. And I do so, again, I'm simply saying there's no religious undertoning to any of the meditations that I use. They're all generally, secularized Buddhist or some Christian, and I use Thich Nhat Hanh. It's just the human nervous system is wired to respond the same way, no matter who you say you are. So let me just do a very simple guided imagery practice around why forgiveness might be a good idea. So I'm going to ask, this is short. I mean, Herb has seen me do these kind of things endlessly, but if you'd all please close your eyes for just a moment. Close your eyes. Allow yourself for a moment to settle inside, just to bring your attention inward quietly. In particular, and I'm keeping these short because of time, just allow your shoulders to relax. Allow your belly to relax so your breathing can quiet down just a little bit. And the most important part of meditation for quieting is when you inhale, make sure your abdomen expands. When you inhale, make sure your abdomen expands so you're not tightening your body to hold the air in. And when you exhale, allow your diaphragm, your stomach to contract to help the air out. It's an active process. And then bring an image to your mind of someone you dearly love. Bring an image to your mind of someone you dearly love. And if you can, while you're sitting there, feel that affection in your heart. Just take a breath and feel the affection in your own heart. And just relax for a minute into just a gentleness from contacting some aspect of love in you. And then let that go. Let that image go. Let the feeling go. Let the whole thing go. And very gently allow your eyes to open. So, took us a while to realize that the reason forgiveness is so difficult is the human being's default of anxiety and threat perception keep us away from that part of our heart. We walk around endlessly inventing reasons to not quiet and open our hearts. When you've been hurt, you have an enormous reason not to open your heart, not to allow that good feeling back in, because you don't trust your ability to keep yourself safe in the world. It really has nothing to do with anyone else. It has nothing to do with the past whatsoever. It's at this moment, if you or I have been hurt, we don't have an inner trust that we can recover and move on and heal and learn to love again. So we don't feel safe in ourselves, and we look for something to blame. It's got to be the past. It's got to be mom or dad or the lover who dumped me, or, even we've dealt with multiple examples of political murder. It's got to be why in 2006, what happened in 2001, that's got to be the cause of why it is I'm unhappy. I don't think it's that simple. I think it's in part because in 2006, people have cognitive reasons for not opening back up, and they have enormous practice in their nervous system being hijacked. And they've conditioned a stress response between the offense and their current experience, and they don't believe inside of themselves they're safe. And you can keep that going till you're dead. And you can keep it going past where grandma's dead, or mom's dead, or the ex is dead, or even the person who murdered your kid is dead. So one of the things we recognized or asked ourselves, well, what is forgiveness? And forgiveness is enough, which is why a religious worldview can be really helpful. Forgiveness is an inner safety, an inner connection to something good that a bad experience can take away. Like I'm back whole, I'm back in my own center. So if I'm back in my own center now, what difference does it make what happened in 1990? That's just history. But if I can be at peace with my life now, right now, then my body will relax. My mind will be able to have different kinds of thoughts. And I'm back in present time, at least for a moment. I'm back in present time. So I don't need the past anymore to explain why I'm miserable. You know, one of the ways that I learned this, and we learned all this by doing. I mean, we didn't know anything. We learned all this literally by doing stuff, by talking to people, by practicing, by whatever. We just, we started a forgiveness project and we experimented and taught stuff. And I was teaching at Esalen one weekend. And this was at the very beginning of our project. And there were about 30 people in the room. And it's gorgeous. It's Esalen, it's on the coast, Big Sur. You got the Pacific Ocean. You got as beautiful a spot exists in the world. And 30 people came in to complain to me about their mothers. And I thought to myself, what the hell's wrong with all of you? Well, I got to understand how true a question that is, but I didn't really understand its full implications. But at that point, it was like, hey, we got the Pacific Ocean here. We got a drop dead beautiful spot. And all you want to do is tell me how bad your mother was. What's wrong with you? Like, how have you taught yourself to have an unhappy life? Your mother couldn't do worse for you than you're doing for yourself. You got the Pacific Ocean there. Shut up and look at it. And many of you will know now that there is research coming out of the University of California about the profound impact of awe to heal. So these 30 people are going on, and I made the mistake, I don't do this anymore, but I made the mistake of asking them like what their forgiveness issue was. I don't do that anymore because I know that they'll tell me and then it'll ruin everybody's day. But I made that mistake then, and I said, so tell me why you're here. And one by one, they tell me they have crappy moms. And some people had crappy moms in the past. Some people have crappy moms now. Other people are going to have crappy moms in the future. It's just all crappy moms. And about 8 crappy moms in, I realized the joke of it all. That everybody's got something. You got 30 people with crappy moms. Why after crappy mom 4 didn't they say, well, ditto. I had a crappy mom too. Nobody needs to hear this garbage from me. Let's just say we all had crappy moms and have empathy and compassion for each other and join together in a kind of positive solidarity, not a negative solidarity. So from my mind, the game was up. The poor me game, the I'm a victim game, the bad things have happened to me that makes me special. That part of the game was up for me in terms of teaching. What was not up for me was learning more of how to do it and how to understand, and this is a crucial component of this. I believe forgiveness is the legitimate end of grief. That grief is an essential response to wounding, essential. And it's proximate and it's time limited, but it's essential. If you're hurt, if you've been mistreated, if I've been mistreated, somebody else has to give a shit. Somebody. 12-step programs are fine. Somebody's got to give a shit about my wound. 2, somebody's got to also say they've been wounded too, that you're not alone. 3, somebody's got to say, and at some point it will pass. So somebody's got to hear the pain, somebody's got to share the pain, and somebody's got to remind you that yes, it hurts, that hurting is legitimate, that there's no free lunch in this, that you're gonna hurt, that the human mind and body and nervous system attach deeply to things. So if your wife dies, or your partner cheats on you, or something in life turns out so different that you never thought it was possible, there is no way to hold that without pain. No way. I mean, maybe if you're Jesus or Buddha, maybe. But for the rest of us people here on the ground, there's no way. And it's not healthy to think that there should be a way, because that's the cost of loving with attachment. It hurts. Whether you love an idea, whether you love a person, whether you love yourself, when that is ripped, it hurts, and it is incredibly healthy to suffer for it. But that's like the to everything there is a season, and that suffering is designed to end. And when it doesn't end in a reasonable time, then we end up with grudges and grievances and victimhood. We end up with victimhood when it doesn't end. We end up with some degree of efficacy when it does end. So grieving that, and the Kubler-Ross's basic outline is true. It's just not true in the way that she hoped it was true, which is that you go through these 5 stages in a row and then you're done. But it is true that you need to go through some aspect of those 5 stages. Some of them circle, some of them come at the end, some of them come at the beginning, some of them are minor, some of them are major. But what is true is if you meet someone who has been devastated by terrible human behavior, which there's mammoth amounts of, and they're only sad, then they need to get pissed for a little bit. If they're only pissed, they need to stop being pissed and start feeling their vulnerability to be fully human. The necessity of grief is in the range of emotion. So you want to know that if somebody's partner cheated on them, ended the marriage, that there's no expectation that 2 months later you forgive and move on. But there is an explanation that 2 years later you've done that. That is the central fulcrum of forgiveness. That you have to grieve your losses, you have to suffer for your love and your affection, and you also have to allow, this is the grief part, you have to allow your brain to integrate the new information that life isn't the way you thought it was, and create a new homeostasis to move forward in. And the people who hold on to victimhood or who hold on to grievance, they're unwilling to create a new homeostasis. They simply want to maintain an argument that they should be allowed their old homeostasis, and somebody's got to pay if they can't. That's the essential issue of forgiveness. Do I move on and learn more about life and grow? Or do I stay stuck and bitter because my incomplete understanding of life proved insufficient? And I'm pissed because I have to grow. I'm pissed. I have to give up magical thinking. I have to give up this BS that it's all good and that if God loved me, he'd take care of me. All that's simply not the way the world works. And it is very, very painful to reorient our schemas to more mature schemas. And people cling to victimhood to get the power of that rather than the power of growth and maturity, which comes when you accept that maybe my view of the world was not a full view of the world. And that's the essential nature of grief to forgiveness. That when you allow your nervous system, your schemas to evolve, oh, okay, that's right. Not every relationship is going to work out. That's an evolved schema. An immature schema is, I love them, they love me, that's the end of the story. When you cling to bitterness because that story didn't hold, or you hate somebody because they shattered your schema, then you have created a grievance. When you cling to victimhood, like poor me somehow, in a world of staggering suffering. You know, the Buddhist stuff on the essentially unsatisfactory nature of life is essential teaching. Nothing lasts in this life, nothing. The best marriage in the world will end. The best child will grow up and move away. The best body will fall apart. So there's an essentially unsatisfactory nature to life due to our clinging. And that's just true. And we tend not to want to grow into that. We tend to become bitter or blaming of whatever points that out to us. Even to the degree that our children don't actually belong to us. You know, that wonderful Gibran in the prophet on children. The children are not ours. You know, they're life. And they come through us, but are not of us. And that's simply true. And it's the same thing with your partner. And it's the same thing with your best friend. And it's the same thing with every single thing we depend upon. It's temporary and it won't last. But human beings don't want to see reality, so they bitterly hold on. And what we try to remind people is that you want to develop your inner capacity to cope with life, because this isn't going to be the last wound you're going to get. And so you got to forgive whatever it is you thought stole something from you. You know, you think something stole it from you when it was just life. And one of the ways that is done, and I don't see how, personally, I don't see how people make it through this life without some kind of prayer, meditation practice. Our nervous system is way too hair trigger for threat to do so without deliberate calming of it. And one of the residual effects of mindfulness is that it does reduce threat. We are less threatened when we practice mindfulness. We see less differences among people. That's actually one of the impacts. Instead of walking through a room and seeing 45 different people because one has blonde hair and blue eyes and the other has blonde hair and brown eyes, and one is from Pasadena, and one's from here, and one's this, and one's that, and one's got this color skin, and one's from this place, and one's this religion. Our threat centers see differences all over the place to protect us. You practice a little mindfulness, you don't quite see as many differences. And we need this desperately because we live in a sea of threat due to our basic biological programming of danger. So that biological programming takes things that hurt us and says, look, you can't trust. This person lied to you. Other people could lie to you. And that's true. Other people can lie to you. So two things have to occur. One, you have to get over the first lie so you don't carry the baggage with you. And two is you have to teach your nervous system to find the good and not just the bad. So let me give you one more guided imagery practice along that line. This will be a tiny bit longer. So if you'd all please close your eyes one more moment. And sit comfortably for 5 minutes. I don't know. It's not a meditation retreat. It's a 5-minute practice. And allow your attention to come inward. Consciously relax your shoulders, because if you don't do that, meditation is really hard, really hard. Relax your shoulders. Relax your shoulders, relax your belly. And make sure when you inhale, your belly expands to welcome the air in. And when you exhale, your belly contracts. When you inhale, your belly expands. When you exhale, your belly contracts. And do what you can to make your belly and your breathing as soft and as gentle as you can. As absolutely soft and as absolutely gentle as you can. And then ask yourself one question. In like the last 36 hours, who has been kind to me? Ask yourself one simple question. In like the last 36 hours, Who has been kind to me? Has anybody said anything nice to me? Given me anything? Been generous? Listened to me complain? Tell me nice things? Feed me? Do my laundry? Help me in any way? Look at your life for any instance of kindness. And then pick one kindness and from your heart say thank you. Pick one instance of kindness. Pick one example of kindness and from your own heart say thank you. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for being good. Thank you. And feel it. Feel that sense of thank you. And then let that go. Let the image go, let the feeling go, just let it go. Very gently allow your eyes to open. So 2 purposes for that practice. 1, again, it's a reminder of where forgiveness lives. It's inside of each of us. We have a lot of kindness, we have a lot of warmth, we have a lot of love. Forgiveness is right there. But you have to find it in each of us. Forgiveness doesn't exist in the offender, it doesn't exist in the past, it exists in our own inner goodness, which you could say is an aspect of soul, or I could say it's an aspect of what part of your nervous system you want to connect with. But when you practice qualities that make you feel more connected, more loving, more generous, more grateful, anything, you tap into the part of you that knows already how to forgive. Whenever you tell somebody how awful your life is, you're tapping into the part of you that can't forgive. And you're reinforcing it, or I'm reinforcing it. Which is why we learn don't let people complain as part of our trainings. Because we know that they're with us because they can't forgive. So we already know what the problem is. There's no news in that human beings can be awful to each other. It's just what flavor. So what we would have people do is instead of complaining, we would teach them how to come to some statement of, X happened. I'm still unable to come to peace with it. I need to learn how. That became the problem, not X. And that's always been the problem, not X. We don't know how to come to peace with life the way it is. It's very hard to do, but that's the problem. We have to learn. Part of the solution is forgiveness. If you have religious coping, then the traditions shout that at you. Yeah, forgive, forgive, forgive. They don't make a subtle secret of it. It's not like if you gave Christians a multiple choice exam. Does Jesus support forgiveness? Yes or no? That would not be that difficult an answer. It would be that difficult to recognize in the community, but it's not a difficult answer. So it's learning efficacy skills and resilience that forgiveness taps into. And it's helping people move away from identification as a victim to identification as someone who dealt successfully with a difficult life experience. And that's how it reduces stress so dramatically. Whenever there's something in life that you can't cope with, you have stress. I have stress because we're afraid of it. If my ex-husband was a terrible human being and I haven't forgiven them, then I'm afraid of men. I haven't moved on. It's not my ex-husband's fault. It's the fact that I haven't developed coping and sophisticated enough schema to handle my own life. And ultimately, what we came to understand, and this is the second piece of it, and it's probably a good place for me to stop, was the absolute essential nature of teaching gratitude and appreciation to anybody needing to learn to forgive. That people who are stuck in grievance, they are almost always gratitude challenged. Almost always. That they almost always exaggerate the negative and minimize the positive. Almost always. So the practice that I showed you is one of the practices that we do to help people get a more accurate view of their life. So one of an example would be like with some of these people that I would work, that I saw 30 years ago when I started, and they came in and told me how bad their mother was. I remember questioning one or two kind of sarcastically, quizzically, like somebody would tell me that their mother ruined their life. And they were 45 years old. And I'd say, well, okay, I get it that your mother ruined your first 18 years. But then you took that bad beginning and ruined the next 25. Your mother didn't do it, you did. Because you never figured out how to deal successfully with a terrible mother. And so with forgiveness, you don't argue that things aren't bad. I mean, I've worked with people whose children were murdered in cold blood and political violence. We did a project at the UN after the World Trade Center attack on forgiveness, and we've seen like horror that you can't imagine. But it's not the content, it's the process. So with people whose children are murdered, we accept that grief will take a longer time. You would hope that if you come home and find your hubby doesn't like you anymore, that wouldn't take 10 years. But having your kid murdered could take a while to grieve it. But if somebody cuts you off in the freeway, you would think that grieving period could be 5 seconds. Everybody needs a grief period, everybody. So one of the ways that we would explain that was if somebody cuts you off in the freeway and you want to give them a middle finger, go for it. There's your grief period. It takes you 13 seconds. You're done. And then shut up about it and never use it to make you a victim of how horrible everything is and how terrible people are. Just give them the bird, get it out of your system, and move on. That's grief. It's when you give them the bird and then you call to people and say, you won't believe how terrible people are on the highway. You go chase after that person to give them some grief. That's all us. That's all us cognitively choosing not to handle things. The intervention of gratitude I have found necessary for teaching forgiveness. It's very hard to help people until they can see life more clearly and not just revenge and negativity censored. What we do is, you're right, that was a terrible thing that happened to you, terrible. And if you haven't talked about it and you haven't gotten support for it and you haven't noticed that some people have experienced the same thing and at some point they move on, then do that. You have to do that before you can release it. You have to. That's grief. But if you've done that stuff and you're still doing it and you're still telling people at 48 what a terrible mother you had, then you're the one harming yourself. Your mom hasn't done a thing to you in years. You're the one choosing to adapt currently to your life in a way that's self-destructive. And as Dr. Phil would say, how's that working for you? And so the necessity of grief, the brilliant Dr. Phil intervention of how's that working for you, and gratitude, I'm going to say, are the three foundations of what you need to go in and work with almost anybody. How's it working for you is so beautiful and so profound. So somebody could rant and rave for 5 minutes and then just look at them and say, okay, I see you're upset still. How's it working for you? How's it helping you now? You feel better? Think mom cares? There's so much empathy in that. Again, the final piece again is if you haven't done this work yourself, it's going to be almost impossible to help other people do it because you will join them on thinking it's the world's fault. It's only when you step out of that a little and recognize, wow, okay, I can rescue myself from that pit. Then you realize what a gift it is when you help other people rescue themselves. That you actually don't want them to suffer and you're not willing to agree with them on the mechanics of them creating their suffering. And again, this has nothing to do with the necessity of grief. Grief is necessary. Grievance and victimhood and negativity, ongoing, those are optional. Anyway, my time is up. I thank you for your attention. The book I wrote, Forgive for Good, probably by far and away the best-selling self-help forgiveness book out there. It's $10 on Amazon if you want to learn more. As you see, I mean, I do have a meditative background. And like Herb, I'm pretty straightforward and do not want people to suffer endlessly. But we do it from really a psycho-social, secular perspective of anybody of any faith and any background and any nationality and any wound. can move through stuff. I thank you for the invitation, allowing me to join your group for a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Fred, before we take a break, would you like to take questions now or after our break?
Well, I want to make sure Herb has his time, so whatever
Right.
he needs, then we can answer some questions after.
Okay, so let's take a 7 minute, let's say 7 minute break. It is now 10:37 on my clock. Does that sound right? So at 10:45 we'll gather. So we invite you if you're in home, take up, stretch, use the restroom, get a cup of coffee. If you're here, there's more bagels and orange juice. Restrooms are nearby. We'll gather at 10:45. Thank you. Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome, Chris.
So we invite you to get your cup of coffee or juice at home or here, and we'll be gathering back in another minute or so. So we invite you to take your seats. And if you're on screen, to come back to us. As Fred said, we're going to move to the next part, and we hope that if you have questions, to write them down so you can bring them to the speakers a little later. So we invite you, if you're in the room, to please take a seat so that we can begin again. We are going to try to move the temperature up a little. Please be seated and please join us back together. We've tried to make the temperature go up a little. I know while the rest of Southern California is boiling, some of you are freezing, I guess. A second on the chat, someone asked, we are recording these presentations, and they'll be available to those who signed up for our day, both online or in the room. We'll make that available for those who'd like. So once again, we want to thank Fred, and we bring Herb up to guide us in the next part of our process.
Good morning. My name is Herb. And in the AA meetings or any 12-step meetings, we would normally say, my name is Herb, and then you would say, hi. So my name is Herb. I'm an alcoholic. There, now I'm connected. Thank you so much. Not that this is an AA meeting, but it's a gathering of people who are attempting to improve their consciousness in order to help people improve their consciousness so that they can reduce their suffering. Well, no, that was Fred's comments, weren't they? So people could improve consciousness to reduce their suffering and take responsibility for their suffering and become conscious of that. If you heard me when I opened up or introduced myself originally, I said that when I came into the rooms in 1984, I thought this was my thinking in 1984 because of my background. I'm a Renaissance man. Thank you for laughing. And after I was in the 12-step fellowship for several years and had done some pretty heavy lifting, I discovered I wasn't a Renaissance man, I was a Neanderthal. Yeah, that was the delusion. And I wasn't embarrassed about the facts. I was embarrassed that I had never seen the facts. I didn't know that I didn't know. I couldn't see that I didn't see. Fred said it differently. One of the books in the 12-step fellowship is a new pair of glasses. That's what I needed. I needed to have new lenses. Fred talked about it. He talked about the script and the story. Most people, including all of the people in this room, have a story. No, you do. Each of us has a story. And we're attached to our story until, in fact, we understand that the story is only half true and half myth, as Fred indicated very clearly, and I hope you heard it, all the different pieces. We create the story for safety, for survival, for a sense of context and connection. It's just what we do. It's not a bad or a good thing. It's just a thing. If you're familiar with Byron Katie, she wrote a book called Loving What Is. And she says reality is reality, but only 100% of the time. Let it sink in. Reality is reality, but only 100% of the time. And most of us take it personally. One of the people in my workshop jumped up one day, a young man, really connected with the new pair of glasses, and he said, Herb. I said, what, Jason? He said, reality's not personal. I said, wow, you had the breakthrough. It's not personal, it just is. And so I'm going to talk about the forgiveness process as I experienced it from a 12-step viewpoint, from a 12-step methodology, from a 12-step process. And as I said in my opening comments, although the vocabulary is different than the vocabulary, some of it, that Fred uses, and the process steps, the methodology and formula probably a little bit differently, but underneath, the dynamic is exactly the same. Become conscious that we're not conscious, become conscious that we are conscious, and then accept reality as it is, acknowledging reality as it is, and adjusting. And he said it. We expect, because of the story we tell ourselves, and we don't know that it's a story because we really do believe it's the truth, until we suffer enough. How's that working for you? You heard him say it. Dr. Phil, how's that work? Well, it's not working. You see, my feet tell me the truth. The man who helped me the most in the beginning was a man who confronted me when I had this thought that I was a Renaissance man, and I was embedded in that thought because of my background. He said, Herb, you have a lot of information. My God. A graduate education in philosophy, a graduate education in theology, a graduate education in psychology, and now you're 4 years sober. Wow, Herb. He was setting me up, right? He said, but you have no transformation. You have a lot of information, but no transformation. Your academic knowledge has never been filtered through your heart to your feet, and you have not changed. He was willing to tell me the truth and hurt my feelings. Well, that's a wisdom teacher. He wasn't doing it to shame me or guilt me or humiliate me in any sense. He was holding my feet to the fire so that I could see the truth. And that began my journey. That was the beginning. Now, it took several years and several journeys through the steps and a little bit of therapy to iron out some of the soul wrinkles, as again, Fred mentioned that. So I found that forgiveness is a process. I'm going to speak for probably 20 minutes. Fred has a commitment to leave at some point, somewhere around 11:30. I'm going to stop before that so that if you have questions for Fred We can have some dialogue there, and then I can stay a little bit longer than Fred can stay. So I'm not leaving until you want me to leave. I want to be helpful. What is forgiveness? Well, the first thing you ought to do when you leave here is look it up in a dictionary. Totally serious. I did that. What is forgiveness? All right. I was in this bind. I began to know that I didn't know. And this man said that the dictionary will be the best next book to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The big book is the textbook. Oh, by the way, Fred mentioned his book. I have a wonderful academic and personal reading background, extensive. Fred's book is the second best book I've ever read. But from my standpoint, that's high compliment. The first book that is on my list as a primary book is my big book textbook, Alcoholics Anonymous, because it's the one that gave me the formula to change my life, for me to be converted from a seeker. All my life I've been a seeker to a finder. And you know, I'm sure, because you're here, finding's a lot better than just seeking. Forgiveness in the dictionary says it's a decision to release. That's what Fred, look at my hand here. A decision to release. A process, gentle. The Lord's Prayer, release them from their debt and you will be released from your debt. There's a paradox in that, the St. Francis prayer. When we forgive them, we are forgiven. To release them, to give us freedom. What Fred talked about was agency. That's a fancy word for taking responsibility. If you notice the first cartoon, that was just Pathetic Herbie in prison. Now this cartoon, Pathetic Herbie, there's no walls, there's no ceiling, there's no floor. But Herb's still in prison because he's got the bars and he's looking through the bars and he's holding the bars and he doesn't know that all he has to do is drop the bars. Now, I didn't make that up. I stole it from the New Yorker magazine from 40 years ago, but it's such a fabulous illustration of what I call the spiritual journey. Fred would call the human healing journey, where we get free and we learn that we have agency, that I am responsible for my thoughts, I am responsible for my feelings, and I am responsible for my behavior and the consequences of my behavior. Now, if you couldn't connect to that formula, I hope someday that you can. Because for you and the people that you work with and attempt to help reduce their suffering, it's the key that Fred mentioned. And that is taking 100% responsibility. Fred said 18, I'll cut you some slack at 21 to become an adult. After 18 or 21, I am 100% responsible for the outcome. Yes, my life may have been deformed by my family of origin or the circumstances that led up to my adulthood. And now I'm responsible to deal with the cards that I've been dealt. 100%. And I'm handicapped. Today I stand here with a vital spiritual life and by my standards, a reasonably emotionally balanced life, but I still have some handicaps in terms of personality disorders. And I have to be very conscious on a daily basis as to how they manifest. And on a daily basis, bring the sandpaper to try to smooth the edges. Ask yourself today, Do you have a sense? You, I mean, he said so many things that he and I could spend the balance of the day just dialoguing back and forth and answering your questions. I'm sure of it. Do you have a sense of well-being? Because if you don't, you can't communicate it. Do you have a sense of freedom? Richard Rohr is one of my teachers, literally, physically. He says, what we do any one place, we do every place. Embrace that. What we do any one place, we do every place. And he said, we're contagious. We either transform it or we transmit it. I'll put it on steroids. We're always transmitting. And we're so sensitive today to, thanks to the pandemic, to contagion and immunization. Who we are is what we transmit. Who we are, whether we're conscious of it or not, who we are is what we transmit. Forgiveness is a process, a decision to release them. And paradoxically, I did not know this when I did the steps and finished my 9th step. I'll talk a little bit about the steps, not a lot, but they're so critical to me that there are just some key major highlight points that I would like to make to you for your own purposes, as well as for your knowledge of it in dealing with the people that you're dealing with, either because they need to have some mechanisms for their own process of opening up their minds and their hearts, and or maybe they're even in a 12-step program or need to be in some form of an addiction recovery program. A decision to release them, a decision to be released. One of the lines that Fred opened up with is, and I believe the part of the theme of the group is on self-forgiveness. Regret, disappointment, remorse, shame, guilt. We're so burdened with it. Some of it is healthy guilt and shame, and some of it's not. And we need to distinguish that. And I couldn't have done any of this work without help, a whole bunch of help. From a sponsor in a 12-step program to a therapist in a psychological program, the most help I have received in the last 20 years is from a spiritual director. And I continue to connect to any resource that's helpful in terms of the various cycles and seasons of my own personal development. Forgiveness, and I have a handout for you. Afterwards, you can pick it up if you choose to. It's a meditation on forgiveness based on my experience with going through the 12 steps. One of the reasons that I've so strongly connected to Fred is that his methodology is expressed and captured in his book, Forgive for Good. His methodology is absolutely parallel to the methodology of the 12-step process. As I mentioned, the vocabulary is different. Forgiveness is not to condone, to forget, to tolerate, to ignore, to approve, to excuse, to minimize. It's not those things. It's not to pardon it. I don't have that kind of power. Or to surrender justice. I had a young man who came to me for some help in his recovery, and I helped him, and he basically looked at his life, and he had to put his father in prison for molesting his daughters. He loved his father. He reconciled with his father, but he wasn't going to tell his daughters that what grandpa did was okay. And this man, the father, at age 68, went to prison for 6 years. He was willing to forgive and to continue a relationship with him of love and kindness, but he wasn't willing to signal to his family that what Grandpa did was all right. He wasn't willing to surrender justice just because he released his father. Pretty dramatic stuff. Not as dramatic as the kinds of examples that Fred has had dealing with some of the catastrophe and tragedy of North Ireland. Forgiveness is a decision to not retaliate or exact revenge or seek compensation or judge. Nope, it's very simple. It's a decision to release them, a decision to release them. But as the man who took me through the steps and helped me have my own spiritual awakening said, willingness without action is fantasy. Forgiveness, that decision without action, is fantasy. It's coming off of what was said in the letter to James, right? One of the foundation documents of Alcoholics Anonymous through the Oxford group back in the 20s and the 30s. James said, faith without works is dead. Faith meaning I believe in God without moving my feet in the direction of integrity and operating on principles of improving my consciousness and helping other people. It's just an empty drum that makes a lot of noise. I believe in God only has meaning if my feet are moving in contribution to the people around me. And so well, I did what's called a resentment inventory in step 4. And this is what helped me get to where Fred talked about in terms of identifying the script and or the story about my life. The myth as it turned out to be, the delusion as it turned out to be. Who am I? I said I was a Renaissance man, but my history said, no, you're a Neanderthal, Herb. All right. And I didn't know that I didn't know, and I couldn't see that I didn't see until I got it on paper. I was asked some questions about how my behavior was, what my belief was. One of the key words, if you wanted to get to a shortcut, it took me several months to do this work. I'm summarizing it in several minutes. But one of the keys, if you want to be embarrassed in your own presence, is ask yourself a series of questions. When you say, I should, fill in the blanks. I should. I should. I should. That's revealing to you your belief. I'll continue. They should. They should. They should. Fill in the blank. It will reveal to you your belief about husbands and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and siblings and employers and employees and coworkers and everybody in your life. Should will reveal, at least it was my experience, what my value system is, what my beliefs are. Now, I'm not saying that they're distorted or that there's anything amiss, but until I was able to identify the lens through which I'm looking, I was looking through a lens that distorted the reality that I saw through the lens. Let me try that again. I have lenses here. If these lenses were pink, y'all'd be pink. But I wouldn't know you're pink because everything's pink. If these lenses were blue, y'all would be blue. But I wouldn't know that you're blue because everything's blue because it's the lenses through which I'm looking. The instrument I just revealed to you in a very short-circuited way about the word should, you're looking at the lenses through which you're looking. You're looking at the belief I should be strong. I should be independent. Nothing wrong with those except to the point that I took them to a steroid level based on stereotypical archetypal things of this distorted idea of manhood that I had, that in fact crippled me in terms of having relationships with other men, certainly, but with women. And then when I got to women should or women are, I was totally embarrassed. This was back 30, 40 years ago when I was doing this work, to see the kind of stereotypes that I had formed in my mind from my culture, from my family, and from my own reaction to all of that. Who am I? Who are others? And then ask about life. You hear it, I hear it all the time. I work with a lot of people. Well, it's just not fair, Herb. And in one of the rooms, somebody said, if you want fair, go to Pomona, right? That's a joke for California because that's where the fair is. But life isn't fair. It just is, going back to the quote from Loving What Is, Byron Katie. Life just is. It's not, hello, it's not good or bad. When the deer comes down to the lake to have a drink of water, it's really good for the deer. When the mountain lion comes up behind the deer and eats the deer, it's very bad for the deer, but it's very good for the mountain lion. I'm not saying a relative morals or anything along that line. I'm just saying that there's a perspective, good and bad. I don't use the words anymore. Healthy, unhealthy, I use those words. Appropriate, inappropriate, I use those words. And then the fourth column, which is a variation on taking another look at a different perspective on the resentments that I have. Resentments is just a fancy word for anger. Comes from the Latin sentire, meaning to feel, and re, meaning to feel it again and again and again. I had a deep resentment toward my father. He was dead 12 years when I'm doing this work at age 48. But I had this volcanic, red hot lava flow rage about my father and how he had fill in the blank. I had pages and pages and pages of catharsis. And Fred, as he said, all that did was whip up the storm. It didn't resolve it. It didn't dissipate it. It didn't neutralize it. But this work did. Asking me what my motives were. What was I thinking? You see, I'm becoming very conscious here at age 48 that, oh my God, he's 12 years dead. And I'm still reacting to something that happened when I was 16. What am I doing? And I'm still behaving in some type of passive aggressive way in different circumstances based on that history, ancient history by this time. What is my fear? I didn't think I had fears until I began unpacking those. What is the source of my fear? Fred had mentioned survival, of course, at the very basic. But I had a fear of honesty. Oh, that's a bit subtle. Why do I have a fear of honesty? Well, it's not subtle at all. I have a fear of honesty. Tony, right? Yeah, because if I'm honest with Tony, he doesn't know me. I don't know him. Just Matt. But if I'm honest with him, telling him what I'm thinking, feeling, doing, and what my behavior is, then he's going to make up his own mind about me. Well, what's wrong with that? No, I want Tony to think about me the way I want to be thought about. So I'm going to create the mask, the persona, the story, so that he will in fact treat me the way I think I ought to be treated based on the story that I tell myself. I hope that wasn't too convoluted. But the whole point of this is to pour sulfuric acid on that mask that I have, that I've created as a defense mechanism, an unhealthy coping strategy, so that my true self can emerge. And that's what this is when I take a look at the fears that I have and the angers that I have. Unhealthy coping strategies to survive in this world but they're unhealthy. My dishonesty is that effort at camouflage, Hollywood storefront. What you see is not what you get. It's a mirage. It's a delusion that I'm creating for you because it's my delusion. I wanted to be treated as special and unique and entitled. Now, I didn't know any of that until I did this work. The therapist that I was then dealing with, in conjunction with the work I was doing in my 12-step work, just smiled at me when I started talking like this. I'd been with him for a little while, and that he felt it was a breakthrough. He got up from his desk, went over to his diagnostic manual, took a page out of it, photocopied it, and gave it to me. It was the 9 characteristics of narcissism. Well, it's a personality disorder that's irremediable. It cannot be treated by medication. It cannot be treated by therapy. I said, well, Dr. Berger, how bad am I? And he said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're a 7.5, and we put 10s in prison. I go, oh, wow. Yeah. And he said, yeah, the only thing missing on this 9 characteristic page, diagnostic page, is your picture. And I'm paying for this, right? Well, about 20 years ago, the same time I connected with Fred, this clinical psychologist and I began to do some work together as colleagues. And I said, well, remember that conversation 10 years ago about scale of 1 to 10, 7.5? And he said, yes. I said, well, what does it look like now? And he says, probably about 2.5. You never get healed from it. But clearly in the spiritual work that I had done in the 12-step process and the therapeutic process combined, had modified, mitigated, as well as along with this forgiveness process, in which I had released all of the sources of irritation and victimhood. I had detached from, and I had been detached from. I don't want to say this is a self-help program, because the 12-step process is not a self-help program. It's meant to help me, but it's in partnership with a power other than myself. The big book has a brilliant phrase in it. It says, God as we understand it. It's a brilliant phrase because it becomes totally ecumenical, all-inclusive. I've changed it for my own benefit, though. I don't do much of it in public, especially in the 12-step meetings, because I don't want to create any confusion. But quite frankly, rather than the God as I understand it, it's the God as I don't understand it. I have no pretense that I have any understanding of the mystery, and that's what I call it with a capital M. But I have a relationship in which I embrace it, and I'm in partnership with it, and I listen to it as Fred does in terms of his meditation practice. I use mine in the same way, but for guidance, specifically for guidance. How do I live my life today? How do I live my life tomorrow? How do I live my life? What's my role? What's my role in my irritation? What's my role in my resentment? What's my role in my fear? And you hear some people say, well, what's your part? If you're in a 12-step program, it's almost common vocabulary, but it's built on a misunderstanding. I don't have a part in my anger. I don't have a part in my resentment. I have 100%. I don't have a part. Because it's my reaction to circumstances, it's my reaction to events, it's my reaction to people. And once I own it, I have agency. Once I own it, I have responsibility. Once I own it, then I can possibly adjust, especially where I'm holding myself accountable to somebody else. The single most important moving part, I do believe, in human development, especially in the 12-step program, is sponsorship or step guide, an accountability partner. Somebody who you can connect to, who has experience, who has wisdom, like what you're all doing in terms of your spiritual guidance in your chaplaincy. It's such an important role to help people from being a true sounding board to hear, to listen to deeply, as Fred talked again about. We all need to be listened to, not in terms of enabling and co-signing, but just to be seen and to be heard. In the end, it says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, we're powerless over our resentment. So we pray for them. We pray not for the people and not for the event or circumstances. We pray for our own healing. We pray for soul surgery. We pray for the removal of the cancer of this anger in me. Specifically, I prayed for the removal of this anger that I had toward my father. I began to see the truth of it, which began to mitigate it, but I couldn't shake it even in therapy. And over the several weeks or months of daily prayer, prayer doesn't change God. I'm very clear on that. Well, at least this is my theory, my understanding of it, a broader conversation for a different day. But very clearly, from my standpoint, what prayer does is change the prayer. It makes me more conscious. It makes me more willing. It makes me more sensitive. And it translates more from my consciousness into my behavior. Because I want to be free. Certainly, I want to be free of my addiction. That was granted to me 40 years ago. But I wanted to be free of my unmanageability, the spiritual malady, those bedevilments, as they're called in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, to be controlled as if by devils. Like I felt I was a puppet on strings, and the strings were tied to circumstances and circumstances and people determined how I felt. This process allowed me to cut those strings, so that I, again, have that responsibility. I keep the center of myself. I keep the center of my self-esteem deep inside of myself, and I don't place it in people and circumstances, because I want to be free. A process, literally, this forgiveness process from a non-religious standpoint is a process of exorcism, to get rid of these bedevilments in us that seem to control us. St. Paul said it, didn't he? In the Christian scripture, I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do. That's the human irritation. That's not the addict problem. That's the human problem. And to learn to have integrity, to have harmony, and to have a sense of equilibrium in my life, that balance that comes with emotional sobriety. I made a list of the people that I harmed. I'm going to wrap it right now. A list of the people that I harmed. And then I made amends to them all. This was the final piece in the process of healing, bringing healing to other people by acknowledging the harm that I had done, by changing my behavior so that I'm not continuing to create the harm, by asking them how I can repair that harm. Sometimes going directly to them, sometimes indirectly, sometimes acknowledging it through some type of ritual practice, because my dad was dead. I went to the cemetery and I wrote a letter and I read a letter as if he were present. And I was there for 2 hours and I laughed and I cried and I read and I walked out free. How do you get here from there? All right, with guidance and with practice and with action, getting guidance from experienced people, but taking the action that requires a lot of courage and a lot of energy. This is a summary of Fred's method from his book to show you that it so parallels the method I just described from the 12-step process, to name the hurt, to understand what was my expectation, my hope, identify the rules of my beliefs, acknowledge the reality of my attitude. My attitude is the one that created my thoughts and my feelings, and especially my behavior. to take responsibility and accept my responsibility, and then to make a decision to take action to repair the damage. I haven't checked it with Fred. He has the meditation that I have here for you, which I've incorporated some of his vocabulary and his process to show that there is a total integration and synchronicity between the two processes. How free do you want to be? It's a question you could ask other people too. Not as a challenge or a confrontation, but as an invitation. How free do you want to be and how soon? I want to be totally free. So I am pressed up against this partnership. God's my managing partner. This mystery is my managing partner. I try to stay conscious and improve that conscious contact on a daily basis, and to hold myself accountable to a variety of people so that I'm not becoming delusional again. Thanks so much. Okay.
So we want to take the next few minutes. We're going to bring up the screen so we can see Fred, and then just invite folks if there's questions or statements that you'd like to share in the larger group. And then following that, we'll do some small group before we close with prayer. So you can see Fred on this screen, and Herb is here. There's a microphone in the middle of our conference center down here. If you have a question from where you are at, you can unmute yourself, and then we'll try to manage the conversation. So. Questions from the floor?
A question or a comment and or even a disagreement, but especially an experience. That'd be great. I don't know if I'm going to take you up on the experience.
We can't hear you.
It's because he's not talking.
Oh.
Can you hear that, Ram? Ram, can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you very much. Fred, I read your book 2 years ago, and so when I saw that you were going to be giving us a talk today, it just meant so much to me because of how much it's been helpful. Herb, in your talk, and this could go to either one of you, you mentioned that forgiveness lets go of retaliation. So my question is, how do we balance standing up for ourselves with forgiving?
I can be quite glib with that. One of the phrases in the 12-step community is we stand for ourselves. We don't stand against anybody or anything. We stand for ourselves. We're releasing them, and there's no need for us to take any action on that in terms of retaliation. Fred, you want to address that?
You know, that idea of standing for would probably be what distinguishes an actual spiritual or religious approach. That the ego self-centered approach is against. The spirit's approach is with. And it's a profound difference. So for us, I would give the exact same answer. We ask people, what do you want to do with your life? Not what do you want to complain about it?
Okay.
Did you have a follow-up to that at all? No, I meant the young man who's asking the question.
Can I put it contextually? I mean, I can, but how personal though?
Well, that's your question.
I know.
I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. Fred made a huge point about.
Or any questions from your
Oh,
group? Maybe next?
good, thank you. He was addressing the people on Zoom. Anybody have a question there?
You can unmute yourself if there's any questions, thoughts, clarifications, comments. Just want to include you and Ron too.
Yeah, there were three. I just wanted to ask Fred, there were three things he said that how's it working for you? Three things that you asked people. How's it working for you? I couldn't write fast enough. If that's in your book, I will go buy the book. But can you just tell me those three things that really, Fred, what you ask people? How is it working for you? Do you feel better? And there was two other things.
I don't remember what I said. I've given hundreds and hundreds of these talks. I can tell you,
it's not something that will be in your book, right?
this
A formula, three
there's
things that are good.
240 pages in the book.
Okay. Does anybody else in the audience remember? He said
But I
it.
will. Let me tell you one thing about.
Somebody here has an answer to it.
But no, let me explain one thing about the deep power of that question. It's a process question, not a content question. So how's complaining about your mother working for you? How's feeling sorry for yourself about whatever you're feeling sorry for yourself for? How is identifying yourself as particularly wounded? How's that working for you? It's process. People who are unforgiving want to hook you with their content. They want you to agree with them that, boy, did I have a particularly difficult life experience, and therefore the rules shouldn't apply for me. That's what they desperately want. They want like a loophole from life because what it is that they've suffered. And without minimizing the suffering, that how's that working for you question, something like that needs to be interdicted. Otherwise, they will just continue with their content. And something has to get them to ask questions about their process, how they are doing it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're
Wow.
welcome.
Yeah, built on that, I'll go back and use a couple of the words or phrases that I use to maybe build a kind of a formula there, and that is, what is it they believe or hope, and then what's the motive? What is the benefit that they're expecting? And those are self-conscious, provoking questions where people can go maybe a little bit deeper than their normal, just visceral response or conditioned response.
We have a group question over here from Orange County, also for Frederick. So the question is, in talking about complaining, how can we balance this with the need for people to express their emotions and experiences? Is there a way to discuss grievances that promotes healing rather than reinforcing the hurt? Thinking especially in terms of our chaplaincy work with patients.
Is there a question in that I'm missing?
Yeah, what's the role? There is some role in the healing process in describing my feelings about fill in the blanks. And so how do you balance that with the not making it a persistent story where you're just retelling the victimization?
It's hard for me to get past. I mean, one of the problems with trying to teach forgiveness is when you articulate forgiveness, you're really so far energetically ahead of where people are with their grievances. And it's really hard for them to even imagine that they could give up even a small piece of their supposed power from being wounded victims. So they cling like crazy to every little shred of that fake power. They cling like crazy. What do you mean I can't complain? What do you mean? What do you mean I can't complain? And the answer to that is complain all you want, but accept the consequences of complaining. Again, process.
Yeah.
Complain all day long if you want, but don't be surprised if you're at a psychiatrist and you have heart problems.
One of the questions I ask people about their story is, why are you holding on to the story? What benefit does it serve you? What is the value of it? And they'll look at me startled and they go, there's no benefit, there's no value. I go, there must be, because you've held it for 20 years. Nobody does anything unless it has a value that's serving some purpose. And that will be like cold water in the face sometimes.
Exactly. The other thing you have to sometimes see is how often people will try to present ugliness as virtue. Complaining is not a wonderful quality. Being a victim is not a wonderful quality. Being resentful is not a wonderful quality. Looking for revenge is not a wonderful quality. But they will do their best to make, put pig on the lipstick on the pig. So the research is that the average middle-class American spends between 75 and 80% of the day complaining. That the negativity bias in your brain is so profound that you don't even realize literally what I'm going to say a kvetching bitch you are. And I don't mean anybody in particular, but us, we're just walking, fetching bitches. And we take it so seriously. Like, oh my God, after work, I have to go to Whole Foods and pick up food. So we do that. Or I got to go pick up my kid at school. Oh, poor me. Or I have to wait in line. Poor me. Or my God, life asked me to do this. We bitch like crazy. And we are so gratitude impaired that we don't even realize how dramatically out of alignment we are. So a true statement when somebody asks you how your day is going, if you're like a middle-class American, is, I'm blessed beyond measure. There's 800 million people who are going to go hungry tonight in the world. There's another billion without enough water. The average wage is like $4 a day, and I'm able to bitch to you about this. So we are so distorted, so unbelievably distorted about reality that digging ourselves out of that is not easy for any of us. So that's my long answer to your question.
Well, and you also indicated in part of your talks too that we have a conditioned response that becomes a default reaction to life because we're not accepting life as it manifests.
Exactly. That's it.
And the two things, the antidotes, and I want to keep it really simple because you did, and that is, one is the attitude of gratitude and a positive look on life. It's a decision to have gratitude. It's a decision to have a positive attitude. It may be totally contrary to the way you think and feel and want, and yet when you make the decision and take the action over time, you will in fact extinguish the negativity and reinforce the positivity, and your life will be sunrise most of the time.
And the other piece that Herb really articulated that part of it really well. But every time you complain, you simply make it more likely that your brain will complain next time. You practice complaining. Again, process. What are you practicing? what you practice, your nervous system gets better at.
So we have a person with a hand up. I don't know the name. Go ahead. It looks like you can talk. You're unmuted.
Hi, I'm Charles Jacobson
Welcome.
from Pasadena, and thank you. You sort of just dealt with this a little bit, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Hopefully, I won't get blasted for it, but just kidding. How do you forgive constant assaults like COVID, war, poverty, gross inequity, and such?
Oh, you mean life?
Yeah.
Life is manifesting, and you go, something's wrong with this, right? Well, wrong. It just is what is. Fred?
You know, I struggle with that question in both directions. I 100% am aligned with Herb on that, and I don't understand fully why there is so much horror, mistreatment, and like terrible nature to this life. I don't understand why people suffer as much as they do physically, and I don't understand why there's so much loss. So those are true. On the other side, I don't understand why all of us take so much from the world than is our share. So every one of us sitting in this room is a thief in some way, stealing from the poor and the underprivileged, and all over the world, we are taking way more than our share. So we're perpetrators as well as anything else. And that I don't understand either. And the last piece that I don't understand is how the world works. I don't understand it. That it could be honestly that this is an absolutely perfect world. And that as you sow, so shall you reap. And we don't know the algorithms and we don't know anything, but we might have set in motion through some karma or something every single thing that has happened. Every single thing. I don't know the algorithm, but I'm not convinced it's always injustice. I'm not convinced. It may be absolutely lawful. I don't know that. But the piece before it is the one that I wish more people looked at. Like, what am I contributing to make this world an awful place? And how do I get myself out of the self-righteousness of asking, what are all these other terrible people doing to each other, when I'm a contributor to all of the inequities and all of the ways that people take way more than their share, create all sorts of tribal alliances. So if I, in my neighborhood, like being nasty about Donald Trump is like drinking water. So, then, so how do you worry? If you can do that, why do you wonder about hate speech? Like, if you're creating it, how can you possibly wonder where it comes from? And that's what gets really hard about all this stuff, which is why I think Herb and I agree that you got to change yourself. So.
It's the only thing I have a chance at taking responsibility for is my behavior, my thoughts, my attitudes, my feelings. One of the answers that I've come up with has put me to peace about the problem of evil. I don't pretend to have solved it, of course, but struggled with the question, a legitimate question, is that we human beings have free will. You either believe that or you don't. They can make a choice. And there's mental illness. And there's instincts in us that get disproportionately tweaked, as Fred mentioned. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous talks about instincts gone awry, that we're we're built for safety and we misread it and misinterpret it. And between free will, mental illness, and the proclivity to self-centeredness, we have the world that we have. But it's also gotten progressively better. If you want to read some pretty interesting thing, read Ken Wilber, The Theory of Everything. And then I just recently finished a book by Steve McIntosh called The Presence of the Infinite. And he talks about emerging spirituality that, like Pierre Desjardins talked about. He was a archaeologist or whatever evolutionary person who talked about the alpha and the omega, that we're on a path of progress. It's just hard to see it when you're in it.
I have to go, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks, Fred, very
it was
much.
Lovely to see you, Herb.
Again, Fred.
So I want to take about 5 minutes and Gloria, I hope in your group and the other individuals, if Yesenia could send them out, we're just going to invite you to just take a few minutes in the group. And if you're all alone, join another group. What's some of your takeaways from this morning? What kind of things speak to you that make sense to take into my own life or into my work life at Chaplains or in my family? Breathe in for a moment. What have you heard? What has spoken to you? What's our takeaway? We're just going to take a few minutes. And Yesenia, I'm not Yeah. What are your takeaways from the day?
No, there was nothing. I didn't. So one of the things, because it's not just them. First of all, there's something that's on. Not the line.
We'll just take another minute. That's right. They would feel this way. Oh, all right, yeah. Yeah. So we invite you to come back together as we close. And we invite those in our room to once again look at our screen and give a big wave to the other folks who are all over the place. Thank you, Gloria, Glory. Thank you, Talesa, Ram. We're glad that Brian and his group is here as well as Ram's group is here. And we celebrate the time we've had together. We hope and pray that you take some of this home with you. We will send a brief evaluation out to all who participated on screen and in person. We hope to hear some feedback for next year. We also will send out any handouts that were handed out here so that those who are home that didn't get those. There is, for those who are in the room, how many are not going to lunch with us? Okay, So for the rest of you, once Ram closes us with prayer reflection, we'll be able to pick up our items, and we're going to be going this way. That's north, that's south, I guess. Sorry. We're going to go south one block on Alameda to Cesar Chavez, one block over and into Olivera Street. And we're going to be eating at the El Paseo Inn. It is lunch hour. I gave them the heads up, but we might have to have a little bit of a wait. But if you go there, there's many restaurants. So it's, as you walk down the Olivera Street, it's on your left, and it's called El Paseo Inn. And whoever gets there first, just tell them that we have, I think it looks like we have a group of 24. So with that in mind, thank you for all those who are participated on the screen. And Ram, if you could guide us out in a moment of reflection.
Okay, thank you so much. So I have a parting reflection that goes like this. On this day, mend a quarrel, search out a forgotten friend, dismiss suspicion and replace it with trust. Write a love letter, share some treasures, give a soft answer, encourage youth, manifest your loyalty in a word or deed, keep a promise, find the time, forgo a grudge, forgive an enemy, listen, apologize if you were wrong, try to understand, flout envy, examine your demands on others, think first of someone else, appreciate, be kind, be gentle, laugh a little more, deserve confidence, take up arms against malice, decry complacency, express your gratitude, worship your God, gladden the heart of a child, take pleasure in the beauty and wonder of the earth, speak your love, speak it again, speak it still again, and speak it still once again. Author is unknown. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Thank you, Australia, for being with us. Go back to sleep.
5 o'clock
Thank
now in
you
the
all.
morning.
Yes. Very good.
So I'll see you all at St. Camillus back at the camp.
We'll aim them back by 2. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
See you there.
So just for those who are having lunch, lunch is paid on your own unless your group has made an agreement to do it together. The Camillus group, I will be picking up. So we're going to go out onto the street of Alameda, make a left, just go to the signal, make a right, and it's just right there, Olivera Street. We'll see you there in a few minutes. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you, Herb. Appreciate it. How to translate it in chapel is always a challenge.
Yeah, very true.
But I think we all. Yeah, super. I'll send you a. Yeah. We'll see you over there, Orlando.
Yeah, we did.
This is your bag. Oh. How you enjoyed it?
I have homework. I gotta do. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, a lot of leaders. Oh, okay, so that.
It was a group from Providence.
There's also a book called Recovery Camp. And they have a training institute for brief recovery counselors. And it's called the Brief Recovery. I just wanted to say thank you so much. Thank you very much. Get the book.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to find out what.
We'll see you there.
Yeah. Perfect. No, I could have perfect. Nigeria. Yeah, another question.
Is that
So you can find a group or a companion or a organization, a club, because then that's like my name. Huge. Oh, huge. Yeah, oh, and people are still adjusting to it. Thank you very much. Now we're taking the nomination. I'll have your work.
last night I did people grocery vigil. One thing I said, Lenny, I'm the I thought it, you know, not married, no scandal, sure not me. Honestly, I have 8 children.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to get that church in line all by myself.
That's right.
We're good. Stay married. And we just for my outfit, but come on, you can tell me I got you.
Once you said yes, you can't walk away.
not gonna go to this right now, yeah, but no, thank you. I stuck with that. Yeah. Thinking about it. But thank you. How far is the bed? The bed or the commitment? Yeah, the restaurants? No, I'm walking. Walk, get out and walk. There's one rock away, but she's got to walk.